we need to talk about the allegations of what's going on at Nintendo, because according to a series of reports, it seems as if a lot of the employees who are making the games that you and I love so much are actually being very badly mistreated. And I want to talk about the reports, the leaks, the official investigation, and what's really going on. What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here. Please like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, I do want to make it very clear here at the start, I am not asking you to boycott Nintendo. I just think that this is important information to have. The same way I've talked about some of the bad stuff happening inside of Ubisoft and the very terrible things that happened at Activision Blizzard, I just think that as an informed gamer, you should understand what's happening to make the magic we enjoy. I am a big believer in a concept called ethical consumption, which means being an informed buyer. If you're buying something that's made inside of a sweatshop, you should absolutely know that. Or if you're buying it from very happy developers who get 4 days vacation every single week or something, that is important information to know. So we're going to go through this big mega article that's been compiled over on IGN, sort of just going through every facet of these very, very, very badly beaten down ex-employees of Nintendo. This article is incredibly long. It is gratuitously in-depth. I am going to be skipping certain sections of it just because it goes so much into the history, the workspace, and the culture of Nintendo, and I want to more laser focus specifically on what's happening to the people who work there, starting right here. Contractors increasingly see themselves as second-class citizens. The people who work at Nintendo of America talk about the bureaucracy involved with being a contractor here, describing how they have to account for virtually every minute of their day on a timesheet, breeding paranoia about leaving your desk even for a minute, lest Microsoft Teams marks you as idle. Now, if you don't know that, a lot of big companies, specifically a lot of game developers, use this thing called Microsoft Teams, where essentially your entire desktop is being streamed to the office place. If you walk away, it tells the managers that you're being lazy. So even if you're just taking a surprisingly wet dump, well, then unfortunately, you're going to get in big trouble by your boss, who can just take a check mark that says you're being a bad worker. This means that some employees even talk about literally making something on their desk to just press a button so they don't get chewed out or yelled at by their boss for simply trying to exist on the clock. Now, here we go. At Nintendo of America, many employees are paranoid about posting on social media lest they be reprimanded or even fired. Translators are a constant feature of life, as messengers are translated and retranslated. Taking time off can be frowned upon and viewed as putting more of a burden on your teammates. Sick days include fervent apologies and promises to be in touch. Now, this is the kind of stuff that I feel like is so increasingly toxic because it exists so much. I see a lot of people who work very, very bad jobs say, well, I never get a day off and it doesn't bother me, or I work 80 hours a week and I haven't seen my family in years. I managed to deal with it. My thought is that people should not have to do this. These people are obviously able to handle it to some degree. The games are coming out, but it's ridiculous that you're constantly having to file a complaint or ask for time off. It's got to go through 15 different managers, get translated into separate languages. Also, they can say that you're a bad person for needing to go to the doctor or something. It's stupid and it's very, very toxic, but going back to that, it contrasts with sometimes overbearing positivity of employees constantly talking about how lucky they are to be at Nintendo, especially in areas like marketing and localization department. Now, I've dealt with that myself. Some places I've worked where everybody is so happy and so chipper and so cheerful, it almost becomes this beat you have to sing to. If you're not part of the team, then you're toxic and bad yourself. They'll actually fire people in some companies just for not being hyped enough about showing up to work. It was at a point where I was very surprised to see threads criticizing Nintendo because I didn't think that there were that many people who'd be willing to talk about it. IGN source remembers, The threads they're referring to stemmed from back in April 15th when the National Labor Relations Board first filed a complaint, which was actually reported on by Axios. This drew notice both inside and outside of Nintendo. It alleged that Nintendo of America and recruiting firm Aston Carter violated an employee's legally protected right to organize, sparking multiple threads from aggravated former contractors and employees who shared their own stories. Now, these people talk about the fact that it is a very stressful and very awful place to work. The other people working there are fun. The other people working there are just hardcore gamers who are excited to be there, who are excited to make this great, colorful art. But it is still very, very toxic to apparently exist inside the Nintendo machine. Now, going on here, Kotaku actually published their own report a couple days later, outlining a bunch of different people who are also talking about the treatment of Nintendo of America on contractors. In their lengthy report, former Nintendo of America contractors talked about being discouraged from using facilities like Cafe Mario, strict attendance schedules that could lead to them being fired if they missed 3 days of work, and other restrictions. The report made waves throughout Nintendo of America as employees reflected on the treatment of contractors and the company seemingly to refuse to offer a path to full-time. Now, this is something I am very biased against. I hate companies that are overly brutal on employee attendance. I understand that we have to show up, we have to do our jobs, you're clocking in, like these companies are paying your bills, we owe them a certain modicum of dedication. But the reason I hate this specifically is sometimes medical emergencies pop up. They just happen. I don't talk about this very often, but in 2011, I accidentally ate glass. It was in some random food, it was not on purpose, but it cut my organs up very badly. Ingesting a foreign object of any degree is going to cause internal damage. I had to be hospitalized. I could hardly move or speak for 4 days. Now, my work was incredibly chill about it. This was when I was at the bookstore. They were fine. They told me everything's great. They obeyed all the doctor's orders of the fact that I pretty much couldn't lift anything heavy for about a month after that. They were chill with me taking random lunch breaks to take all my antibiotics that helped all my organs heal. My work realized that if you supported me, I would support you. I ended up working there for years and years and years, and I was extra dedicated because they were accommodating to the fact that I'm actually a human. But going back to this, right now the mood is really tense, says longtime contractor within Nintendo who declined to be named. Worst case scenario, because Nintendo of America is a marketing company, any article like Kotaku's is marketing. You really just worry, what is Japan going to see? Is Japan going to see this, and what are they going to do about it? I mean, punishment is one of the worst things about it. IGN's own reporting corroborates these stories, the harshest of them mostly coming from contractors in areas like customer support and testing. Speaking with a dozen current and former full-time employees and contractors at Nintendo of America across several departments, the picture that emerges is of a company that has steadily become more heavy-handed and more restrictive despite the ongoing success of the Nintendo Switch, particularly in matters like the recent closure of the Redwood office. Nintendo has contacted for comment, but they decided not to respond. The mere fact that IGN managed to find so many different sources inside of Nintendo, both current and ex-employees, to all talk on this topic, and they all came to the same negative conclusion, I feel like is a very clear point that this is a problem. In fact, they even go on here to talk about what I feel like is one of the most toxic aspects of this. It has been made to perceive there's this reluctance to hire new full-time employees at Nintendo of America. Despite the career site currently listing more than 100 jobs, the perception is that there's no path for contractors to become full-time employees. Instead, Nintendo of America is seen to be relying more and more on an army of permatemps who are treated as second-class citizens despite being full-time employees in all but name. Now, this is what's ridiculous. So many freaking billion-dollar corporations do this stupid trick, and it is just so mentally damaging on the workforce. Nintendo is a very big and complicated and secretive company, And that's kind of what causes the problem. Each contractor starts with the hope that they will become a regular employee, and very, very, very few people do. Now, the reason this is just so crappy is a lot of times contractors don't get the same benefits. They don't give you any sort of special bonuses. You don't get typical vacation. You don't get good insurance. A lot of times they'll give you this very, very downgraded version of even pay and stuff. And then there's that vague promise. If you keep working hard, eventually we'll let you join the team. But this can sometimes go on for years. There's cases of people who help out, sometimes for 2 and 3 years, on multiple major Nintendo projects who don't get hired on a permanent basis, which means that eventually you just get cut and let go, and they just consider it ending your contract. They don't even call it firing, so you don't even get typical firing bonuses. They go, all right, time to pack your desk. Thanks for your hard work. Don't let the door hit you in Mario's ass. Okay, so going back here. Changing of the times for Nintendo. Most employees that IGN spoke with agree that the culture at Nintendo of America really started to shift around 2015. It was a particularly tumultuous period in Nintendo's history, noted with the struggles of the Wii U and the sudden death of CEO Satoru Iwata. Now, this was obviously a very dark time. Even as outsiders to the Nintendo business, we could see that things were rough. The 3DS still wasn't doing incredibly great. There was a lot of very big shakeups, and Satoru Iwata was very clearly the person that a lot of Nintendo was riding on his back. His decisions, his choices, his marketing, his ideas, and the fact that he died so instantly, it definitely made things very, very hard for everybody at the company. But here's where they go on. It was a sharp contrast to the opening of the Nintendo headquarters just 5 years before that, when the company was still enjoying the double success of the Nintendo DS and the Nintendo Wii, two of the biggest bets from Nintendo's history. In fact, up here, one of the parts I skipped, if you want to read this article, it's very interesting, but they talk about the fact that even in 2010, the company was a very bright, happy, and positive beacon inside the gaming industry, and just within 5 years, it became a very, very toxic place to exist. Jen, a former contractor who was at Nintendo for 10 years, remembers both of these eras. Speaking with IGN over Zoom, she talks about how there were many more opportunities to become a full-time employee when she first started, and even for support specialists working in areas like the call center. When I was there, contractors actually had a path to employment. In 2009, you could become a phone rep and then a Nintendo of America Red Badger. Now, Red Badger is what they internally call the real employees, the people who have earned their way up the ladder a little bit. After just starting that, you had to aim pretty high, trying to get as many cases as possible. Business was booming for Nintendo in 2009. In December alone, Nintendo sold more than 3 million Wii consoles, fueled by a price cut earlier that year. Nintendo's big bet on motion controls and the Blue Ocean paid off spectacularly, but the good times would soon be coming to an end for Nintendo. They talk right here more directly about the fact that even though Nintendo is growing, even though Nintendo keeps having bigger projects that need bigger teams, they still refuse to actually hire people and rely on contractors that come and go very, very fast. You could be working there a couple months and then instantly be fired. In fact, let me read this part right here. People are still called internally associates, and this is half of the entire English localization staff is these contractors. It's put a strain not just on the contractors, but on full-time employees as well. With associates, you're required to take a 2-month break between 11th month contracts. Project managers have had to scramble to organize and reorganize workloads in order to account for the varying resources and bandwidth. I mean, keep that in mind. Imagine if you're working at a company and at one point there's 200 employees, but during certain times, huge chunks just disappear. Their contracts end, they're forced to go away, and you have to try and shuffle things around, allocating businesses, redoing your schedules, redoing all the freaking projects that need to be done. That workload must be so incredibly stressful to try and adapt over things that you are not at all in control of. Another hidden cost of relying on contractors is a higher rate of turnover, which, if you don't know that term, turnover means the amount of people who are hired and versus how long they quit, how long they stick around. At just 4.7%, Nintendo of America has notably had a lower turnover rate than other tech companies, which usually average closer to 13%. Nintendo of America employees are known for staying for years or even decades at a time. Many of the people that spoke to IGN know of at least one person who's been working at Nintendo since the NES era. By comparison, contractors are far more likely to leave after less than a year with the company, leaving full-time employees to start from scratch in aspects of experience and training, meaning that a huge chunk of that company right now is probably dedicated to getting contractors, training contractors, getting them up to speed, showing them how everything works, and then they either leave or get fired, and then you have to do the whole thing over. Full-time employees are dragging the weight of this very, very bad business model because it makes it cheaper. It makes it so they can probably make games at a cut cost, even though it definitely hurts the bodies and minds of the people making the games explicitly. It just seems like they're throwing bodies at things, our source says. It just seemed like the full-time staff are drowning all of the time. They didn't hire enough full-time people, so full-time people just end up managing more and more contractors, getting more and more bogged down, and then there's this bottleneck. That's how contractors end up training each other because the full-time staff is just buried. They are so overloaded, they're having the temporary employees train the other temporary employees. Nintendo's real staff don't even have time to do the work that's on their plate. Now, here's the most damnable part. I do want to end this right here. This goes on and on and on and on and on. I do highly encourage you to read it yourself. But here, I feel like this is the most damning of all the evidence, which talks about depression mode. One of Nintendo of America's chief modern architects is former Nintendo of America president Reggie Fils-Aimé, known to fans as the firmable pitchman. He's known in a lot of videos as the Reginator. Now, obviously, Reggie is not even with the company anymore. He retired back in 2019, but he still is a very vocal talk and in a lot of times advocate for Nintendo. But even he just sort of admits that things have been very toxic at times. When I was being recruited, I'm at this lunch with the head of human resources for Nintendo of America. No job offer in hand, but I first visited Nintendo of America headquarters, meeting with the head of HR, and I'm asking about people-oriented initiatives. What do you do from a learning and development perspective? What do you do from the perspective of enabling people to get exposure to different things, to different thinking? Well, Reggie, we don't have that here, is what he said. I was taken aback, and he continues. Japanese parent, our parent, doesn't believe in this. Therefore, we do not implement this. And I literally said, this is not consistent with my beliefs. This is not consistent with what I believe a leader needs to be. Now, Reggie here is trying to talk up the company and sort of sugarcoat the fact that this is a very, very negative thing. Like, working in a company that offers no benefits, no rewards, no encouragement. You just have to work for your entire life, head down focused with no freaking carrots on a stick until the day you die. That feels like what they're trying to do. Like, him trying to act like, well, we've done a little bit, but even here they directly ask him, hey, how do you feel about the fact that they mistreated a bunch of their employees? And Reggie's like, what? I don't know what that is. That really happening? Oh my gosh. Oh, they keep treating all these people so bad. I've read the same stories, the division between contract and full-time employee. All I can say is not the culture that I left. You know, I'm not sure I believe you, Reggie. I think you saw this happening. Or if you didn't see this happening, maybe you should have paid more attention. You can see the stages of depression and loss in each different person in different ways, says the source within Nintendo. I was told myself that I was a baby, and that was my rationalization of why it was okay to be in this situation. I enjoyed my time. I was new, and it wasn't a big deal. I still considered myself young, but I wasn't that young. As I was there longer and I got more responsibilities, I realized how much the difference is between a contractor does and what an employee does is meaningless. One of the things I was really disappointed by was seeing them hire no more project managers. A project manager is the direct liaison between the main Nintendo and the tinier freaking project leads. Individual single projects usually. Only now, because we're jamming more and more work is going into single individuals, I think you tend to have two projects now. These feelings are exacerbated by a mix of restrictions that employees tell experts at IGN. These are often commonplace contractors. that are described as demoralizing by those who experience them, contractors are excluded from everything from company holiday parties, which is stupid, to the company's various diversity groups. The words second-class citizen are regularly used to describe employees who carry a blue badge instead of a red badge. They frequently feel unwelcome, and that's because this is a big old crappy thing. You can't even eat in the freaking Cafe Mario. Like, there's a cafeteria. You're even not allowed to eat in the cafeteria too long. What is this? This is the most insane, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. I'm just shocked. Even now, like, the deeper I go into this, the more you realize that this is just not a good place to work. God, Jen had to be forced to return home due to the death of her mother, leading to the interviewer to tell her that she had attendance issues. Oh my gosh, like, this final sentence here really sums things up very perfectly. We loved working there. We were being so exploited. We didn't realize it until we left. At Nintendo, I did it out of passion and a love for the product. And they know that there is a line out the door of people who are willing to do exactly that for dog food. And that's the sad part. They know that if you complain, you don't have to be there. They can let you go and hire the next gen. And that's what frustrated me in the end. I didn't know I was on Death Planet until I left Death Planet. Well, it is up to you to make up your own mind. I'm not here to tell you what is correct, what is moral, what is right, or what is wrong. I do think that Nintendo, I hope, having the spotlight gets a little bit of extra awareness about these issues. Please do not just blindly go down to the comments and say, oh, but they make Nintendo, oh my God, Zelda. Realize that these are people. These are normal people who are being directly hurt. I want them to just get more pay, more rights, more healthcare, live better lives to make the games that we freaking love so much. Get them paid, get them laid, get them in the freaking vibe that they deserve. If you love Nintendo, you should love Nintendo employees. And if you love Nintendo employees, you should be begging for them to get a proper life. But these have just been my thoughts. Tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. And please keep dreaming. Oh, God. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.